Around the turn of the decade from the 2000s into the 2010s, Square Enix had a vision. They wanted to create a mythos in which to spawn several games and game series from. This would come to be known today as the Fabula Nova Crystallis, and although it never quite came to fruition and we only got a few games from the mythos, it still managed to spawn one of the most divisive trilogies amongst fans of the company, the Lightning Saga. Upon the release of Final Fantasy XIII, fans' hopes were high. It's the first Final Fantasy of the HD era, the first Final Fantasy on the new home console hardware, the first mainline Final Fantasy to release on an Xbox console. But it's safe to say, many fans were displeased with the state the game released in, and with the subsequent release of each direct sequel, the divide in the community only grew. The series as a whole is often looked back at by fans of Square Enix with disdain and discomfort. I, however, have not played the trilogy since I was just a little child. I don't have an opinion to hold on the game, and so it got my mind running. Having seen one too many videos talking about and criticizing Final Fantasy XIII and its sequels, I wondered if it was as flawed as people made it out to be. And just like that, I had made up my mind. I had decided I was going to play the entire Lightning Saga from start to finish to answer the question, are the criticisms fair? This is going to be either a 2 or 3 part series, depending on how long it takes with each game, but this first video will focus solely on where it all began, with the first release in the series, 2010's Final Fantasy XIII. We start off our adventure with a beautiful cutscene of a train going through the mountains while some unknown girl monologues about how the 13 days following her waking up was the beginning of the end, followed by our main protagonist Lightning and one of the supporting characters Saz going wild on some troops within said train. We then get our first look at the world we'll be exploring for the next 35 to 40 hours of playtime, and it's right and proper gorgeous. We're shown that there is some form of conflict going on between what looks like a military and regular civilians. We love riots around these parts. No time for jokes though, as we're thrust straight into a boss fight with a giant scorpion mech. I skipped the tutorial because I'm a true gamer and I don't need them. After we beat the mech, we get a look at what will be the gameplay loop for essentially 90% of our playtime, walking down a hallway, killing some enemies, and getting interrupted by cutscenes. As we make our way down the bridge, it collapses, prompting Lightning to show off some fancy gravity power. It's never really explained, and Lightning kinda just forgets that she has it for most of the game past the start anyways, so it's not important, and we're just gonna move on. Saz breaks our gravity power tech, so we're forced to fight our way to the floating equivalent of a drawbridge. Lightning and Saz discuss why each of them are here at the Hanging Edge, both being for the Pulse Fal'Cie, although Saz never states that until further down the line. I feel like this is a great spot to stop for a moment and explain some terms and things about the world that the game really does a piss poor job at doing so itself. FF13 does this thing, where it just starts throwing around terms and phrases as if they expect the player who's never played before to know what they mean. So to make it simple, I'll just explain it here first before things get too messy and convoluted. There are 2 worlds, Cocoon and Gran Pulse. Pulse is the larger world, and Cocoon can be described as an artificial planet the size of a moon. On both Cocoon and Pulse, there are things known as Fal'Cie. Fal'Cie are in essence mini-gods that help run the world. Although there is a difference between Pulse Fal'Cie and Cocoon Fal'Cie, Pulses being more wild and untamed, while Cocoons usually have a specific and set purpose. Cocoon doesn't like Pulse, and vice versa. These Fal'Cie have the ability to brand people with a mark, after which they will be known as a l'Cie. After becoming a l'Cie, you gain access to magic and summons, but you are also given a specific task you must complete called a focus. It's never clearly laid out to you, so you need to figure it out yourself. Should you fail to complete your focus in time, you'll become a Seath, pretty much a walking zombie monster. People who complete their focus, on the other hand, turn into crystal and are granted, quote, eternal life. You following so far? Good. Whenever someone from Cocoon comes into contact with a fal'Cie or a levied from Pulse, it almost always leads to execution and or purging, which is exactly what is happening in our current circumstances. We are in the middle of a purge of an entire resort town because someone was branded as a levied from a Pulse fal'Cie that was discovered nearby. So now that we have all that context that the game just assumes you know out of the way, we can get back to the current events. Lightning and Saz set off on their flying sky bridge and we are introduced to the worst character in the entire game, Snow Villiers. And let me tell you, I do not like Snow for the entire game, but I hate Snow between chapters 1 through 8. His entire personality can be boiled down to one thing. He has a hero complex. He's gonna be the big hero who saves everyone. I mean, he literally never shuts the hell up about being a hero and saving everyone. It is so goddamn annoying. Anyways, he's leading the resistance against the military, and this girl who we will come to know as Vanille sums him up the best anyone possibly could when she says,
First impression of Snow? All talk.
Snow then valiantly claims that everyone's going home together and it's a super awesome motivational moment, and I'm sure nothing bad will happen. Snow promptly gets everyone killed. What a splendid job at leading the resistance he's doing. Anyways, directly following the bridge collapsing and everyone dying, the Vestige with the fal'Cie in it is lowered down into the city. I'm not actually sure what the hanging edge is, so I'm just gonna call it a city. The Sanctum, which is Cocoon's government, makes an announcement to those being purged, stating this land is not their home, and they will totally kill them should they try to flee. Lightning and Saz make a suave escape from the flying bridge, and Snow acts like nothing just happened and he didn't get a shitload of people killed. There's more talk about him being a hero and saving everyone, and it's revealed his bride Sarah is inside the Vestige. Let me tell you, the only saving grace of playing Snow in this first chapter is the little dance that Lebro does whenever she uses a potion on you. Snow and his friend hijack these flying bikes and use them to get back to the rest of the refugees, before Snow makes his way off to the Vestige to hopefully rescue Sarah. These two children, named Hope and Vanille, then decide to steal the other bike to follow after Snow, since Hope would like to have a few words with him. He watched his mother die following in Snow's footsteps after all. They crash into the Vestige and Vanille grabs her weapon and voila! That is the end of Chapter 1 of 13. Chapter 2 starts with us piloting Snow for a bit as he bumbles around pressing technology looking for his bride. Lightning and Saz try to find a way to open the door to the Vestige, and Lightning prays to her sister to open the door. They get inside and also go looking for Sarah, who just so happens to be Lightning's sister. Now I don't have much to show for this chapter in terms of fighting, because I mostly ran past every encounter. Seeing as you don't start any character progress until Chapter 3, I didn't feel that it was a necessity to engage in battles. Hope and Vanille eventually find themselves surrounded by a bunch of Seath, and Snow comes to their rescue. They all set off together to find his bride, although Hope is rather reluctant to do so. Lightning and Saz reach Sarah first, and Saz says one of the stupidest things I've ever heard after just being told Sarah is a levied.
Time to go. We have to leave before the army... What?
That's a Pulse brand. That girl's a levied.
My sister.
Your sister?
She's a levied.
What? A Pulse levied?
Snow and the rest of the gang then show up, and Sarah has a touching moment with the two of them, and we get a glimpse of the fact that Lightning blames Snow for the fact Sarah is a levied. Sarah then tells them to save Cocoon. Snow exclaims he'll protect everyone, and Sarah promptly turns into a crystal, meaning she has successfully completed her focus. Sarah then sheds a crystal tear into Snow's hand, and he has a big fit about how she's not dead and how he won't stop at anything to find a way to get her back, to which Lightning gives him a very well-deserved punch to the jaw, telling him he needs to face reality. The military then starts blasting away at the Vestige in hopes to kill the Pulse fal'Cie inside. Everyone then decides to go and try to get answers and information from the fal'Cie. Lightning says fuck that and starts to attack it, which prompts it to wake up, and we get our first real boss fight, as well as my first glimpse at Square Enix's patented fuck the player design philosophy, which seems to be ever present throughout this game. You see, Square Enix decided to implement one of the worst gameplay mechanics I think I've ever seen. When a party member dies, you can just revive them, be it a Phoenix Down, the raise spell, or otherwise. But if your party leader ever should die, like I do right here, well that's game over, baby. Gotta restart the fight. It is so unbelievably stupid, and I am so glad that no other mainline Final Fantasy game has the same system. After defeating the Pulse Fal'Cie Anima, all 5 of the people who are in the room at the time are branded as Pulse Lassie. The Vestige then erupts into crystal and goes fucking nuclear, tearing down the entire city and freezing the lake underneath into crystals. We then get a flashback to day 11, which means day 11 of the 13 days leading up to the Purge, during which we get to see Snow propose to Sarah and give her a matching necklace to that which she wears. He then takes her to see the fireworks up close, which is incredibly stupid and of course nearly gets them both blasted in the face. The chapter ends with them embracing under the starlight and riding off. Chapter 3 starts with the gang waking up outside the Vestige on the frozen, crystallized Lake Bresha. Snow, still being his insane and delusional self, exclaims that Sarah must have been the one to save them, to which Lightning was gearing up for another punch. However, she's interrupted by some stray seed. The crew discovered that they can now use magic and were introduced to the real combat mechanics, paradigms. The paradigms are bad. They're not good, and I do not like them. It is not the concept that I dislike, I actually think the concept is really good. It's the execution of that concept that I dislike. So the idea is, each member of your team has some roles available to them. Each role does a different thing, such as Ravager being a magic casting whilst building stagger, Commando being physical damage and stagger maintenance, Synergist being buffs, and so on. You can use these roles and customize them to make different team compositions, which in all fairness sounds fine in theory. But by the gods, it's horrible in practice. To switch roles mid-combat, you have to do a paradigm shift, which wouldn't be bad except for the fact that it interrupts the combat and takes a good chunk of your time to do an animation, time in which the enemies do not stop attacking you, and therefore can most certainly kill you. It interrupts the flow of combat and is generally just a really weird design choice, and to make it worse, the party AI feels like it's brain dead sometimes. There were so many occasions where Lightning was on low HP and Vanille was on medic, and she would just sit there doing absolutely nothing for an extended period of time, way past when her ATB gauge should have been fully charged. It's a real shame because the system could have been really interesting had they just put a little more thought into the small details such as the animation locking you out of combat for a short period of time. It has a lot of potential, but it's just more tedious than it is enjoyable in its current implementation. After fighting off the Seath, everyone takes a moment to reflect on the fact that they're Lassie now. Hope gets mad at Snow for not being able to save his mom, to which Snow is completely oblivious to said fact. Hope then blames Sarah for everything that's happening and generally just acts like a whiny little baby here. Everyone decides to just kinda get up and start walking, following behind Vanille's overly bubbly personality. After some time, everyone stops to discuss what they think their focus is. Saz explains how a focus works, and everyone looks at him like he's the most suspicious man under the sun. Then another incredibly stupid interaction with Saz happens, where Hope says 2 incomplete thoughts about what he saw during his vision, and Saz declares that everyone's focus must be the same thing, without anyone else in the party ever stating what they saw. Somehow Saz just knew that everyone had the same dream. They discuss what they think it means, and Snow butts in saying it must be to protect Cocoon, his reasoning being that Sarah said so. He runs off to go find her, and the team follows suit. We then get to hear the reasoning on why Snow thinks their focus is to protect Cocoon, that being that Sarah had said it right before she turned into Crystal, and since their Fal'Cie was the same as hers, it must mean that their focuses are connected. The military shows up and we get another cutscene of Lightning doing badass stuff. Vanille throws up some gang signs after promptly killing the soldiers, and Lightning says we gotta watch out for their elite military group. Vanille, being best character again, decides the best course of action is to just run away from their problems. Saz laments about kids being made Lassie, and Snow says not to worry cause he'll protect them. Saz says he can't do that cause he is a kid, which is 100% true, and everyone just kinda mopes around some more. There's a lot of just standing around and moping in this chapter. The party carries on for a bit more before finally stumbling upon the crystallized Sarah, which How convenient. That lake seemed pretty fucking huge, and they just managed to find her very shortly after waking up. Snow tries to dig Sarah out, and Lightning decides they need to move on. Snow is still being delusional, saying shit like he'll protect everyone and no one will die, the usual spiel. This of course pisses Lightning off, and she goes off on him. I mean, just watch this.
Does she look protected to you?
I can save her!
What can you possibly do?
God, it's satisfying seeing Snow get punched. Unfortunately, before Lightning could wail on him some more, they're interrupted by the still alive but really beaten up Scorpion robot from the first chapter that Saz and Lightning fought. Snow decides that he wants to stay behind to try to dig out Sarah, while the rest take off with Lightning. After trekking in one direction for quite a long time, we see the military is being deployed in large force to catch stragglers. Lightning says we gotta skedaddle quickly, so we continue our long walk down a corridor. Now, whilst you're exploring the maps, characters will often have conversations with each other. Usually, it is a welcome distraction from the tedium that is the core gameplay loop. Sometimes, however, you will get moments like this.
We really have to go this way? I'm too old for this. I may be able to see, but I ain't getting any younger. Oh, how high is this thing? I don't think I'm gonna make it. Here's catching.
4 times in the span of a minute did Saz say something about his age. It's overkill and it is so goddamn annoying. Eventually, we find ourselves in a large set of ruins that I guess was just like chilling under the lake. It's never properly explained, but that's not important. We run through the ruins all the way to the end, and Vanille summons forth a very mediocre boss for us to kill, after which we find ourselves an airship as well as our ticket out of here. We cut back to Snow, who has been found by the army by this point, and during the ensuing conflict, he summons forth an Eidolon, that being Shiva, who in this game is 2 very hot blue girls. The idea of summoning fights in this game is simple. You just do what they want. For example, they want Snow to be on the Sentinel roll and get beaten up, so you just be on the Sentinel roll until the gauge above their head fills and you win. After Snow beats them, they turn into a fucking motorcycle. Which is like so unbelievably silly, but badass at the same fucking time. Snow ultimately gets taken in by the military though, and we are treated to another really nice cutscene of Saz flying and fending off military ships, during which Primarch Daisley, basically the Prime Minister of this world, is giving an announcement that the purge was successful and everyone was peacefully relocated. We are then shot out of the sky and wake up in a giant pulse scrap heap from a war fought a long time ago. The gang splits up here, with Hope and Lightning going one way, and Vanille and Saz going a different, and thus ends Chapter 3. Chapter 4 starts with us piloting Saz and Vanille, the road Lightning and Hope took now being blocked off. We get a flashback to Vanille on day 11 throwing up gang signs while making a wish on some fireworks. We also get to see Lightning as her lieutenant states he's putting her up for promotion. We then cut back to Lightning with Hope finally catching up to her. We get more of the usual here. Running and fighting and running and fighting. Chapter 4 is by far my second least favorite, because most of what happens during it seems entirely pointless and annoying. It's just walking, interrupted by pointless cutscenes every 5 minutes of people splitting up, coming together, or arguing about their circumstances. It's very, very tedious, and I hated my entire hour I spent in this chapter. We then get another flashback, this time to day 13, during which we see Lightning quit her job as a soldier and volunteer to be purged, knowing now that she had joined to try and save Sarah. Lightning then gives Hope a quote that sticks with him for the rest of the game. Hope is too tired, and so Lightning decides to leave without him. We cut back to Saz and Vanille, who have decided to take the opposite path. Saz and Vanille eventually meet back up with Hope, and together they carry on to go find Lightning. Saz gives a brief rundown of the war with Pulse, and how this place was built using junk from the Pulse machines, and we get our first glimpse that something might not be right with Vanille here. Eventually, the gang catches up and joins forces with Lightning. We are then treated to a pretty neat boss fight with one of the cooler and more memorable enemies from FF13. Eventually, we find ourselves at a crossroads to which the gang has yet another disagreement. Lightning decides she wants to go and take on the entire government and raise some hell. Saz wants to, not do that. So Saz and Vanille take the approach of running away from their problems, whilst Hope and Lightning decide to take the fight to Eden, essentially the head honcho of the Cocoon Fal'Cie. Now piloting the Lightning and Hope duo, which, by the way, is probably the best duo in the game. I love their dynamic. We set off towards PalumPolum to hitch a ride up to Eden. I then get treated to another taste of the party leader dying game over mechanic, which just makes me hate the combat even more. Lightning and Hope take a break and we flip on over to Saz and Vanille. Hi, hello, it's me from the future. I'm jumping in here because I forgot to write this in my script and didn't realize it when I went and recorded all my audio for this video, but Lightning has her Eidolon summoning here, and I just completely skipped over it, so yeah, make note of that. Saz and Vanille decide that they're gonna go to Nautilus, which is essentially one giant amusement park, a la the Golden Saucer. They find their way to a cliffside and decide to call it a night, and we get a glimpse through Vanille's super happy, always cheery persona here when she starts crying during her sleep. We then cut to Snow, who is being transported on the Lindblom, a very large airship, as he meets up with the head of the cavalry, one of the Guardian Corps' military units, Cid Raines. Cid informs Snow of the Sanctum's plan to publicly execute the l'Cie, and asks for Snow's assistance in finding the others, hoping that he can use them to take Cocoon back from the l'Cie and put it in the hands of the people. We are then given a quick playable flashback of Sarah breaking up with Snow when she first reveals to him that she is a l'Cie, and Snow says that it's okay, she'll be fine and he'll protect her. Thus ends Chapter 4, and I say, good fucking riddance. Chapters 5 and 6 both focus on a different pair that came out from Chapter 4, that being Lightning and Hope and Vanille and Saz. Chapter 5 is one of my favorites. I know a lot of people dog on Chapter 5 since it is one of the worst offenders when it comes to just being a long hallway, but at least it's pretty. The chapter starts with Hope, who is starting to show some development, no longer being a whiny baby, deciding to take charge. You run for some time and eventually Lightning gifts Hope her dagger, which is a very sentimental item to her, being a gift from Sarah on her birthday 2 days prior to the Purge. Hope and Lightning take a moment to hide from some soldiers before realizing they aren't even on the lookout for them. They now understand that PSICOM has kept the other branches of the military completely uninformed of their failures in chapters 1 through 3. We find ourselves at a giant gate-like thing and Hope starts to wonder how the rest are doing. They talk about whether or not Snow's alive and Lightning exclaims that he's too stubborn to die, before really laying into him here. We descend to the lower half of the Gapra Whitewood where the animals being experimented on are located, and we trip a security alarm. Knowing soldiers will be on our tails, we book it. Lightning can tell that something's bothering Hope and infers it's gotta do with Snow. Hope explains to Lightning how his mother was killed because of Snow, and how he blames him for everything that's happened with Sarah, the l'Cie, his mother dying, etc. And says Snow's gotta pay for it. Hope asks Lightning if he could use a sword, of course she says hell no, and we get a flashback to when Sarah and Snow tell Lightning on her fucking birthday she both became a l'Cie and is getting married to Snow. What a horrible time to do that. Lightning, of course, is very much not having any of it, Snow still blabbering, even in the past, about protecting her. Lightning then watches the announcement that a Pulse Fal'Cie has been found in the Vestige, and finally believes her sister. We cut back to reality and continue our journey. Finding a bunch of dead soldiers, Lightning tells Hope to stop having empathy and sympathy and shit or he'll never survive. To which Hope cooks up this incredibly stupid plot point that he calls Operation Nora, the ultimate goal of which is exacting revenge on Snow. Lightning points out Snow wasn't the one who actually killed his mom, it was the Sanctum, and she is half right. They wouldn't have been there if it weren't for the Sanctum, but also Snow is definitely partially to blame. We finally reach the end of the Gapra Whitewood and fight this big Bulbasaur wannabe, and Hope, I guess just on the fly, decides that this is the first phase of Operation Nora. We leave the Whitewood and set our eyes upon PalumPolum. We then cut to Snow talking with a lady named Fang, who will become our ultimate party member down the line, followed by a flashback to the day that the army found out Sarah was a l'Cie. Snow takes her to the Vestige and then immediately regrets it after it sucks her up inside and takes her hostage. He then crash lands on the beach at like fucking 100 miles per hour and is totally fine, not even a scratch on him. Thus ends, however, Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is extraordinarily short, almost as short as Chapters 1 and 2. We pilot Saz and Vanille through the Sunleth Waterscape, Vanille being her usual overly energetic bubbly self, and Saz being in a sort of unsure depressive state. They hide from some ships passing overhead, after which Vanille is all like, let's run, the other direction of trouble, and off to Nautilus they go. After walking for some time, we get a cutscene where Vanille is trying to learn more about Saz, which gets to the topic of children. We then get a flashback to day 11, this time from Saz's perspective. We see Saz's son wish that Saz would become cheerful again like he used to be. It's our first hint that something is eating away at him about his son, but we won't learn more until later. We then get a tutorial stating that we don't have to take every battle that we see. I promptly ignore this and pick a battle that I cannot win. I of course got myself killed. Deciding the game probably knows best, I then avoid almost every battle from here on to the end of the chapter. The two stop for a short break again, this time to catch up on a little sleep. Vanille wakes up to see Saz standing by a lake, so she goes to talk with him. This is where Saz reveals to Vanille that Dodge was picked by a Sanctum Fal'Cie at Uriday Gorge. During the flashback cutscene, we see that Vanille actually already knew all of this and was present at the gorge when Dodge was chosen to be a l'Cie. We hear how Saz blames the two Pulse l'Cie that snuck in for his son being chosen, thinking that the Sanctum Fal'Cie chose Dodge to protect itself against them. Pretty much telling Vanille he blames her whilst being completely unaware of the fact that it was her. It's then also revealed that Dodge can sense Pulse presence, which is how he discovered the Fal'Cie inside of the Vestige at Bodum. We then hear Saz lament about the fact that he only got on the train to be purged to kill the Fal'Cie, thinking that would maybe complete Dodge's focus. However, he's unsure that even is his focus, and throws out the idea that maybe his real focus is for the l'Cie to die, in which case he'd have to kill himself, but the tiny little chocobo says he can't, so he doesn't. All around, I like this a lot. It's a real moral dilemma that Saz has been thrown into, and there's a lot of drama with Vanille that he's completely unaware of right now. At the end of the chapter now, we get a pretty neat boss fight with the snazziest fucking tunes I've ever heard. I mean, listen to this boss theme. If there's one thing that Final Fantasy XIII does great, it's the fucking music, man, I swear. They then find themselves waiting for the boat to Nautilus. Saz complains some more about their current predicament, saying all this really happened because Dodge sensed the Pulse Fal'Cie, and Vanille interrupts him saying not to blame Dodge, to which Saz replies that she's right and it's actually those two Pulse l'Cie who are at the gorge, still unaware that it was Vanille, and this is where Chapter 6 comes to its close. Chapter 7 is where the game starts to pick up. Story threads start coming together, and things start to actually happen. On the downside of that, however, this is where the chapters start becoming way longer. The chapter starts with the military mobilizing upon the town of PalumPolum, whilst Roche, I'm not exactly sure how you say his name, the director of SciComm, gives a speech to the general populace about the terrors of Pulse and what have you. And it actually seems as though he really believes that Pulse l'Cie are all by default evil and threaten the way of life as we know it. We're then shown Lightning and Hope sneaking in. Hope points out some tunnels they can use, and we're back to playing the game. We get a short cutscene in the tunnels talking more about the Fal'Cie as we get a glimpse of the Sanctum Fal'Cie Carbuncle in charge of food production. Lightning talks about how humans are leeches to the Fal'Cie, and Hope says that we're more like pets. This prompts Lightning to have a very strange epiphany that, oh yeah, I guess you're right, without someone to serve, my life was meaningless. She then uses a whole lot of words to say a whole lot of nothing about how she was fighting because it made everything else around her disappear, and how Hope got swept up along with her, and how it's all been a big mistake and shit. She then declares that Operation Nora is cancelled, and practically spits in the face of her entire character and the person that she has been up to this point. Now look, I can understand what the writers were going for here, wanting to have Lightning come to terms with the fact that she's been running away from her problems this whole time and not actually really ever facing them, but this was just the worst way to do it. It throws away everything that Lightning has embodied as a character up to this point, and it comes out of left fucking field. I hate it so much. Her entire character flips on a dime here. Like, she even said back in chapter 4 that she doesn't serve the fal'Cie, like verbatim.
I don't take orders from fal'Cie. How I live is up to me.
It wouldn't be nearly as bad if Lightning had shown any hint of this change coming within the last 7 chapters, but she hasn't. She has been completely steadfast in her beliefs, which is why I think this is just one of the worst character moments in the entire game. Hope, of course, then asks Lightning, what do they do now that Operation Nora has been cancelled? And Lightning says she does not know, but they cannot lose hope. Lightning then talks about how she changed her name with the idea that it would make her stronger, and Hope cries some more about how Snow killed his mom and how angry he is at him. Lightning implores Hope to speak with his dad whilst they're here in PalumPolum. After reaching the surface, they realize they've been found and surrounded by the military. Lightning tells Hope he should run and that she'll keep them busy. I don't know how she's gonna keep an entire fucking army busy, but when all hope looks like it's lost, Snow and his compatriots arrive to save the day. We get treated to a damn sexy cutscene of Snow and Fang riding around on Shiva shooting people, followed directly by playing as Snow for the first time since chapter 3, and boy does it suck just as much as I remember. Of course, Snow, 7 chapters into the story, a full 14 hours in of gameplay, is still saying the same shit about being the hero. We are then forced to play as the worst duo pairing the story has given us yet, Snow and Hope. They're both 2 of the most annoying characters personality-wise, and they suck to play together as a party. Everything they fight feels as though it takes a fucking year to kill, and their section during this chapter is by far the longest, which makes it all the more painful to experience. We get another scene of Snow being absolutely blind and oblivious to the hate Hope has for him, and unwittingly making it worse by saying the most out of touch and stupid things possible. Saying shit like, "It's stupid to fight if you get killed." Practically saying to Hope's face his mom was a dumbass. Like, just look at this scene.
The army's no match for Nora, right?
He was smiling.
How the hell is Snow still so damn unaware? Hope was straight up staring daggers into his soul. Snow and Lightning set a rendezvous point, that being Hope's house, and the military decides to get rid of all fire zone restrictions, meaning fuck civilians who are in the way. Snow says that there's hope that Sarah will turn back from being Crystal, and Lightning tries to warn him that Hope plans to fucking kill him. However, the line gets cut off before she can. We then switch over to operating Fang and Lightning, one of the best pairings so far. As we progress, Lightning notices that Fang has the marking of a levied, though it looks different than the others. Fang explains that she's a pulse levied like everyone else, but she isn't from Cocoon. She's a pulse levied who actually came from Gran Pulse. She explains that she had completed her focus and her partner and herself had turned into Crystal. Then when they woke up, they were on Cocoon. She then proceeds to casually drop a, albeit very obvious, bombshell that Vanille was her partner and is also from Gran Pulse. We cut to Hope and Snow spying on some soldiers, leading civilians to safety. Snow states that they'll be purged since they were in contact with levied, and says they need to do something to save them. He keeps on doing his spiel about protecting everyone, which is, just pissing Hope off more and more. We stumble and fumble our way into a crowd of people, and Snow causes a big ol' commotion to try and scare everyone off so that no civilians get in the way of the fighting. We run down an alley just to find that the people we scared off have come back with all manner of random items to try and fight us. Snow uses a billboard to block their way, and Hope returns a stuffed animal to a small girl, showing that they aren't actually all that bad. We then use a jetpack of one of the flying guys to get onto the roofs away from the angry mob. Snow implores Hope to go visit his father and talk some more about protecting Cocoon and yada yada, the usual spiel. The military then shoot down this floating billboard for seemingly no reason. Like, no one was on it, and there wasn't even anyone nearby, they just kinda shot it down.
Palamecia's only hope is a quick death.
We then get a taste of the worst fucking enemy thus far, this flying bike motherfucker that for some reason they thought was a good idea to give a skill that can one-shot kill party members. I mean, just watch this. Eventually, Hope finally gathers the courage to try and confront Snow, asking how Snow would feel if his family was taken from him and he couldn't take them back. Asking what if he knew who was to blame, Snow replies that, there'd be trouble. And Snow can finally tell that, hey, maybe something is bothering Hope. Asking if he's okay, but before they could continue, they're interrupted for a boss fight. After the boss, Snow and Hope move to a different spot to take a break from the fighting. Hope gets a flashback of his mother and finally loses it. He starts laying into Snow about everything, and the faces and sounds Snow makes here just crack me the fuck up. It's like his whole world just at once started coming down around him, and I love it.
And what if that gets people around you involved?
What?
What happens when your actions end up ruining someone's life? What then, Snow? How do you pay for what you've done?
I can't!
I actually really like this scene. Snow finally being confronted with the hypocrisy in his idea that a hero has to try and protect everyone, and the fact that his actions have done more harm than they have good, getting more and more people involved each time, is honestly really good. Snow doesn't know how to fix his problems that he creates, so he just decides to smile and run away from them as if they don't exist, and he's the good guy, and in turn hurts those around him, just like how he brought Hope's mom into danger. Hope eventually exclaims that Snow deserves the same fate as those he gets killed and knocks him off the edge. Snow finally realizes that he got Hope's mom killed all the way back in Chapter 1. But just as Hope goes to finish him off, a gunship starts blasting missiles at them, and Snow takes a plunge, grabbing Hope and using his own body as a shield from the impact as they fall to the ground. We then cut to a flashback at Uriday Gorge and see Fang send Vanille off by herself while she distracts the guards. Fang says that the fal'Cie chose Sarah because her and Vanille didn't do their job properly, to which Lightning brings out the good old trusty slap. The two of them continue on towards Hope's house. Lightning and Fang talk a little bit about Pulse, and Fang laments about the fact that she must have completed her focus at one point, but she can't remember it at all. She then states that she doesn't care about Pulse or Cocoon, she just wants to keep Vanille safe. She then shows Lightning how to tell how much time you have left before turning into a Seath. They see the explosion that blasts Snow and Hope off the ledge, and decide, hey, we should probably pick up the pace. Snow grabs the unconscious Hope and starts carrying him off to his house. Dude even climbs up a whole ass ladder with Hope dangling over his back. Hope finally wakes up and Snow gives this whole speech about not being able to change the past and what's happened, but wanting to be given a chance to make things right, which works enough to make Hope stop hating his guts for the time being. The boss from before then shows back up and absolutely tosses Snow to the side. You have to fight as Hope for a bit until Lightning and Fang finally show up and join the party. They grab Snow and together depart, finally arriving at Hope's house, to which he informs his father of his mother's death, and they have a nice father-son bonding moment together. Snow then apologizes to Hope's dad for, getting his wife killed, and then still blabbers on about saving everyone and being the hero. Everyone then starts to discuss their plan of action, and while doing so are ambushed by the military. We quickly fight our way out of the house, and Snow tries to reason with the troops, walking out to show everyone that he's just a human and no different than anyone else, which gets the troops all riled up, not sure what to do. Director Roche now properly introduces himself, acknowledging that he understands that this is their home, but states that their mere existence disturbs the lives of millions of residents on Cocoon. Snow then points out he's full of shit, saying that if he wants to kill l'Cie, then he should just kill l'Cie. Why purge every citizen that comes into any amount of contact with Pulse? Just then, however, Roche is ambushed and his troops are put down. As the chapter draws to its close, we get one of the coolest and most enjoyable boss fights the game has to offer, the Sky Tank. It starts out with a lot of firepower, however you can slowly kill each weapon, making it more and more vulnerable. Honestly, it's really fucking cool. After taking down the Sky Tank, the cavalry swoops in to rescue our party. We all depart from Hope's father's residence, and we swap on over to Saz and Vanille, thus ending Chapter 7. Chapter 8, following the same pattern as the other Saz and Vanille portions, is also very short, which again, I do not mind, certainly less so after spending 4 fucking hours running around one city in Chapter 7. There's honestly not a lot going on in the first part of this chapter, it's very second half loaded. You spend most of the first 30 minutes just running around Nautilus, taking in the sights and attending parades and shit. Eventually we go to look at some chocobos, and Saz says that he is going to turn himself in. Vanille says he can't do that because she knows who the Pulse Lassie responsible for Dodge becoming a Lassie is. But before she can say, they're promptly interrupted by the military firing upon them. After fighting our way through Nautilus, we fight this big tank monster thing, and Saz is reunited with his son, who promptly turns to Crystal, having completed whatever his focus was. As stated in the Chapter 6 section, Dodge can sense Pulse presence, and thus the military used him to find Saz and Vanille. Nabat, who I guess is the leader of PSICOM, I can't exactly remember her position, shows footage from Uriday Gorge, which clearly shows the fact Vanille and Fanged were the ones who woke up the Fal'Cie and are technically responsible for Dodge becoming a Lassie. Vanille runs away and Nabat does some emotional manipulation shit, and Saz follows after to kill her. There's then a weird, I guess, like dreamlike sequence thing where there's a fake Saz confronting Vanille about the fact that she lies to use people for protection. He says if she's tired of living with the guilt, then she should die with it. She implores Saz to shoot her, and Saz says it's not good enough, and Vanille has a real emotional breakdown, unsure of what to do. Saz says there's really no reason for him to continue living, and summons forth his Eidolon. Vanille, however, steps in the way to protect him. Saz gets up off his ass and joins her, challenging his summon to a battle. We, of course, beat the man and turn his ass into a go-kart. After the battle, Saz decides to let Vanille go and seemingly shoots himself in the head, ending the chapter with them bringing Vanille and what seems to be a dead Saz to be imprisoned. Chapter 9 is another really long one, taking place on the Palamecia, the flagship for the Sanctum Fleet. Sid Raines and co can tell that we're being tempted into a trap to rescue Saz and Vanille, and we decide the best course of action is to just go balls to the walls all in. Unnamed soldier man with luscious hair flies us into the Palamecia, and we are immediately detected and thrown into action. We jump out onto what I think is a docking zone. If so, it's gotta be the world's worst designed dock system. You know how easily someone could fall off this shit? This is definitely not up to OSHA standards. We cut to our locked away compatriots and get to see what happened after Saz seemingly shot himself, having not actually done so. Nabat knocks his ass out after antagonizing him. Saz and Vanille make up, and we get a flashback to day 1 where Vanille and Fang wake up. Vanille states that she had remembered everything, while her partner Fang didn't remember anything. We switch from a code red to a code green. Whatever that means, they kinda start throwing codes out willy-nilly here. Saz and Vanille then make their daring escape, and Saz says that we aren't running from our problems this time. We are then put in charge of Saz and Vanille, with yet again some of the funkiest tunes this game has to offer. We flip from a code green to a code purple, and Saz declares that we shall go get ourselves rescued. After fighting our way through some more, we get to see Nabat freaking out about a million different code colors before Primarch Daisley is all like, Code White, trying to be menacing, but failing miserably since we have no fucking clue what Code White means. Whilst Saz and Vanille fight their way through the engine room, the rest of the gang finds themselves outside, like, on the wing of the ship or something. They release a bunch of random monsters that I guess they just had stored inside of the ship. We are treated to one of the easiest boss fights in the game, dying quicker than most of the normal encounters, after which Vanille and Saz just kinda blow up the wall and waddle on out. The boss monster comes back with a vengeance, though it does it no favors as it dies equally as quick this time around. Fang inspects Vanille's branding, making sure she still has time. The party then fills in the two on what the plan is, that being taking down the Sanctum. Also, I wasn't sure when to mention it, and it's not a huge issue, but they have this weird auto blur feature that's supposed to like blur out the background during these cutscenes. But a good majority of the time, we wind up in a situation like this, where the characters in the foreground accidentally go blurry. It's not game breaking, it's just like a weird minor tech issue that gets on my nerves and takes me out of the story. More of the flying monsters we just killed show up, and Fang just, I guess, decides to start being a badass now. I don't know why she didn't just do this one-shot kill Dragoon jump thing from the start, but it's whatever, I suppose. We all proceed to hop on its back, and Saz gets absolutely shafted with the seating. We blast our way right into the hallway, directly preceding the main deck. Now that the team is finally all together, we have the option to change our party. I, of course, take this opportunity to switch the party to be nothing but cute girls, because I am a gamer. Now, right before I started the final boss fight of this chapter, I noticed yet another minor gripe that pissed me off. When you run in this game, for some reason, you don't just run straight, you run at an angle. So if you just hold down the forwards button, you start drifting to the left or the right. Anyways, we make our way into the main deck throne room thing, and Nabat hops her happy ass down, all too eager to fight us. Primarch Daisley then tells her to fuck off and starts blasting everyone on the main deck with his magical balls. Daisley declares that Cocoon is just a factory to mass produce humans to be used by the fal'Cie. He declares, without the fal'Cie, everyone is hopeless, and then reveals he's not actually a human, nor a levied, but rather he is Bartandalus, Lord Sovereign of the Sanctum fal'Cie. This boss fight I dislike a lot. It's not necessarily hard or complicated, but Jesus fucking Christ if it isn't long. I remember the first time I ever did this fight on the PS3, it took me 20 damn minutes. This time it took me a total of 13 minutes, so not nearly as long, but still lengthy as fuck. After beating him, he explains to us that to properly put down the fal'Cie, we have to do something called Ragnarok. He then clearly lays out our focus to us, that being one of us needs to become Ragnarok and kill a fal'Cie named Orphan. Orphan being kinda like a fuel source for another fal'Cie, Eden, who is the fal'Cie that provides for pretty much everyone on Cocoon. No goes on again about how our focus must be to protect Cocoon because that's what Sarah said before turning into Crystal. Daisley is all like, nah, you're a dumbass, her focus was to bring you guys together so that you can be made into levied to destroy Cocoon. Daisley then straight up fucking crashes the flagship whilst providing us a way to escape. Roche, the asshole from Chapter 7, who is still somehow alive after being shot, chases us down and tries to blast our ass out of the sky. We fly to Eden and I'm almost given fuel to make a 9/11 joke, before teleporting away, thus ending the chapter. Chapter 10 starts and the gang is caught up inside of a New York subway station. Vanille exclaims that it looks something like from Pulse. Everyone takes a moment to reflect upon what Bartandalus told us, that being our focus to destroy Cocoon. Everyone decides this is too much brain power to be expending, and we start walking looking for a way out. Snow is standing around sulking about how he was wrong and his focus isn't to protect Cocoon. Lightning does her best to cheer him up. Our presence here wakes up some old Pulse technology, and Fang and Vanille explain that this place must be an Ark. Basically a Pulse arms depot used to train levied to become stronger. The Fifth Ark is one of the most hated areas in the entire game. And for good reason. It's basically a 2-hour long hallway with nothing important going on almost the entire time. I, however, am a master of the art that is running past enemies and avoiding fights, which makes this chapter pretty trivial. After having run in a straight line for like 30 minutes or so, we find ourselves at the halfway point. Sid Raines somehow magically found us and was just chillin' waiting around for us to show up. Raines reveals he is actually a Sanctum levied. His focus is a little unclear, but it's something to do with setting us on our path to destroy Cocoon. He basically explains to us that the fal'Cie are big babies who miss their mommy, someone called the Maker, and they can only get them back should Cocoon be destroyed. Sid decides that he wants to go against his focus and stand in the way of the levied, which makes sense, he's in a way trying to save everyone, but it turns him Seath, and we get a pretty cool boss fight, though he is extremely annoyingly designed. He has some of the nastiest combos that if I was even slightly weaker, could probably kill me from max HP. After Sid is defeated, he actually turns to Crystal, which If his focus is what he said it is, to assist us in destroying Cocoon, then, he shouldn't have turned into Crystal, right? It goes against the rules established about this world in crystal stasis. The whole crystallizing concept is really poorly explained and fleshed out, so I'll just say that the leading theory is Bartandalus turned him into Crystal because he needs him alive for later. We continue on our warpath through the Fifth Ark, walking down literally the exact same copy-pasted corridor for an excessive amount of time. However, we eventually find our way to the end. Snow gives a nice motivational speech about doing what Sarah and Rains want and protecting Cocoon, to which Fang says, "Count me the hell out." She pretty much says that she's gonna go smash up Cocoon and whatnot because it's a really shitty place, and she isn't wrong. In the process, however, she summons her Eidolon Bahamut, who kicks my ass a few times. Having tamed the summon, however, we walk along the path that magically showed up, which leads us straight to an airship. Ooh, how convenient for us. We all decide to board on and head down to Pulse to try to figure out what to do next and try to defy our focus. We're then treated to an absolute gem of a cutscene when our airship is smacked out of the sky by an air centipede. It's got some of the best dialogue yet and some of the best character writing yet.
You okay?
Oh yeah, I'm great.
Grab on!
Home sweet home. Welcome to Gran Pulse.
With that, however, Chapter 10 has ended. Honestly, it is one of the worst. It's long, boring corridors copy-pasted over and over, interrupted once by Rains for some story events, and once more at the end for a summoning battle. I can understand why people hate it. We're starting to get close to the end here with Chapter 11, as we get an introduction to Pulse being a wild, uncaring land, basically the Australian outback. We then get into immediate action as Hope's branding is going off and he's about to summon his Eidolon. However, he's off on his own, so we gotta rush to go find him. We catch up and find Hope, but he's passed out. When he wakes up, he tells the party we should go to Erba, which he for some reason knows exists without having ever been there before. He tells everyone to go without him because he'll hold us all back, but they assure him he's fine. He gets upset and worried that his weakness will get someone hurt, and then properly summons his Eidolon, that being Alexander. And if you thought Bahamut was a tough one like I did, man, Alexander is a whole nother beast. I died, and died, and died, and died again. Don't worry though, because I eventually got his ass, and from here we're finally let into the open world. Open in quotations, however, because there's not a whole lot to do. You can hunt some monsters and ride some chocobos, but that's about it. I take this opportunity to go farm up some CP from this spot where two large strong monsters are, although I don't have any footage save for this failed attempt after Vanille gained too many ATB segments. From here we set off down this tunnel system being dug out by one of the Pulse Fal'Cie and decide we should hitch a ride on him. Fang reveals that she now remembers what happened all those years ago, that being, she had turned into Ragnarok and left a scar on Cocoon. She confronts Vanille about why she would lie to her about it, and during which, Vanille winds up summoning her Eidolon, Hecatoncheir. After beating Vanille's summon, Fang and Vanille make up and we set back on the road. Hope eventually falls right in the path of the Fal'Cie and does some fucking Attack on Titan, Aaron Founding Titan shit and commands all of the Juggernauts to stop the Fal'Cie. After doing so, we all board it and ride off to the water area. We get a flashback of Sarah talking with Vanille at Bodum on the 9th day, and we learn that Sarah was the one who gave Vanille the idea of just running away from your problems. Vanille has like a breakdown on the beach around someone who is practically a complete stranger to her, and I can only imagine how awkward this must have been for Sarah. We also learn that Vanille blames herself for Sarah being a l'Cie, and says that she thinks Bartandalus is lying and that Sarah actually did the right thing. Snow gives the most unenthused response ever, saying yeah, he knows. We then get a scene where Lightning and Snow talk for a bit, and she tells him not to let Sarah down after they get married. Snow starts doubting that they'll get to see her again, and Lightning tells him not to worry about it and that there's no room for doubt. It's honestly a really nice scene, showing how the two have come to actually like each other now. A far cry from the start of the game, when Lightning couldn't for the fucking life of her stop punching him. Eventually, we arrive at this tower a Fal'Cie has made into its nest, And God, let me tell you, this place makes the Fifth Ark look like heaven. Basically, the idea is that you need to do side missions for these talking statue guys to rotate the walls so that the elevators can function properly. And every time you go up a set of main floors, they cut a bit of the fal'Cie off. There's nothing really story relevant that happens here, but goddamn, it's like an hour of just running between the same 3 rooms to fight slightly stronger normal mobs just to progress. It sucks. Eventually we reach the top of the tower and we do battle with the fal'Cie, and this sucker is one of the most badass bosses yet. They really stepped it up in the latter half when it comes to boss designs. After we beat him, we look off into the distance, seeing that Erba has become a desolate desert landscape. You descend into the city and there's some minor side activities that you can do. I choose to skip over them because I'm starting to get more and more frustrated with the game and I just want it to be over. Eventually we run into Sarah, who starts talking all crazy and shit about how we should totally destroy Cocoon and kill everyone and what have you. Like, totally Sarah kind of talk. Of course, it's just Bartandalus, and he says that he has appointed Cid Raines as Primarch in his stead, which has prompted the cavalry to mount an attack to try to kill Orphan, figuring that Cid has betrayed them. Now they don't really have a choice. We can either kill Orphan ourselves, or sit back and watch someone else do it. Oh yeah, we also fight Bartandalus again, and he leaves us another airship to get back to Eden. I'm sure I don't have to tell you why this is a really fucking stupid plot development. If using the cavalry to kill Orphan was always a choice that Bartandalus had, then why in God's name does he need us to become Ragnarok? If he could have just used the cavalry from the beginning, why didn't he? His word is gospel to the people of Cocoon. Anything he says, they'll do. All he has to do is say that, oh, Eden told me to tell you guys that they want you to kill them. Boom! Problem fucking solved! Everyone decides that we should protect Orphan and not let the several million people on Cocoon be sacrificed so that the fal'Cie can get their mommy back. Thus ends Chapter 11. Hi, me from the future again. So while I was editing this video and watching back my playthrough, I came across this scene, and I just wanted to complain about it, right? Okay. So right after we beat Bartandalus, we see one of those side quest crystals appear, and Vanille's all like, oh, I suppose it could be a recording of what happened here, without any inference or reasoning to suspect that. But it just so happened to be the correct assumption out of all the things it could be. Story writing like this pisses me off so much. It overall just lowers the quality of the game and the story that it's trying to tell when they do bullshit like this. Chapter 12 starts with Cid Raines giving a speech, and we get treated to the game crashing the Indy 500 at Cocoon. And honestly, this cutscene is one of the best spectacles this game has to offer, which is an achievement because every cutscene in this game is a fucking spectacle. We start things off with a 1v1 against the mech we fought at the very start of the game, a great way to show our character's growth from the beginning of the series. Meanwhile, whilst we're off crashing the races, the cavalry starts summoning forth a bunch of monsters from Pulse and causing a general panic amongst the civilian population. Cid Raines is then murdered by that guy whose name I still don't know with the really nice hair. We do our best impression of the Dream on Kratos meme, and Lightning, finally, for the first time in nearly 25 hours of playtime, uses her goddamn gravity powers again. We fight our way through some soldiers and make our way to the undeniable worst part of the entire game. Everything up to now has been annoying and tedious, but this tiny little section, the fucking expressway, is by far the worst. Jam-packed with fights that can take 5 to 10 minutes at a time, a long, tedious run, monsters that can one-shot kill you. It's moments and sections like these that make people want to quit games and never come back to them. It is just so goddamn awful. And at the end of it, we meet back up with Roche, who is still the stupidest motherfucker in the entire game. Snow tells him we're on the same side. He acknowledges it and then says it doesn't matter because we're a levied, as if we aren't the one fucking chance he has at saving Cocoon. And you know what? His boss fight just adds to the fucking hatred I have for the expressway, cause it is just as fucking stupid. The boss fight with the Proudclad was my breaking point. Since around chapter 7, I had not been having any fun, and steadily, with each new chapter, my hatred and frustrations with the game were only growing. And this dude made them tip over the threshold of what I deem worthy of playing. So I gave up. I stopped playing. Final Fantasy XIII frustrated me so much in its second half that I quit playing the fucking game. However, I still have a story to finish here, so let me just tell you what happens for the last 2 hours or so of the game. And yes, I realize I was extraordinarily close to the end of the game, but I could not put up with Square Enix's insufferable design choices any longer. After beating up Roche and his following retreat, we set off to try and put an end to this and stop Bartandalus. We try and find our way to Eden Hall, which is like the center of Eden, where the Fal'Cie Eden is located, but are stopped by a gate. Snow's friends from way back at the start of the game come in clutch and open the gate for us. Hope tries to fit in with Nora to be a cool kid, but it just comes off as awkward.
You concentrate on saving Cocoon.
We all will, together.
The rest of Nora take off to go rescue civilians and injured while we enter into Eden Hall. While we're walking into Eden Hall, our party notices a bunch of little crystal fragments floating around in the air. Bartandalus shows up and tells us that the ruckus is bringing forwards the Maker just as he wants. He informs us that he and Orphan await at the highest seat in Eden, and hints that our loved ones might be in danger. We elect to do things the typical Snow way, that being charge in head first and hope things work out for the best. We get pinched between some Sanctum soldiers and Pulse forces, having to fight our way out. We watch as the Sanctum soldiers are turned into Seath, the result of being given a branding whilst not receiving any focus. They're being used as sacrifices for the Maker. We finally catch back up with Roche and do battle yet again. This is as far as I've ever gotten, having not been able to beat this boss when I first played on the PS3 all the way back when I was like 7 years old. After beating him again, Roche despairs about the fact that he had to kill millions of innocents just to keep the populace from panicking. He finally has a change of heart as he orders all of his troops to stand down and instead focus on evacuating as many civilians as possible. He essentially relieves everyone of their duty. He tells the party to continue on to save Cocoon, Snow tells him to stay alive, but those noises he's making, it doesn't really sound like the noises of a man who's gonna live through this. He then detonates the Ironclad, sacrificing himself to block off the entrance into the Heart of Eden so that no one may follow us in. Deep inside Eden Hall, the building begins to collapse in on itself and we are transported to Orphan's Cradle, the real Heart of Eden. We do exactly as we have done for the rest of the game, fighting through hallways of enemies that are copy-pasted over and over until finally we find ourselves face to face with Bartandalus once more. He teleports Daj and Sarah into the room, making little illusions of them shattering. He employs us again to just kill Orphan and put an end to Cocoon, as a mercy, reasoning that as long as Cocoon exists, it will conflict with Pulse. Of course, everyone is all like, "Nah homie, we came here to kill you," and Barty tells them to obey if they really wish to end Cocoon's suffering. Of course, we get treated to another Bartandalus fight. We beat him up and he slips down into this little pool and says some shit about release at last. Everyone celebrates for a time, thinking that they won, protected Cocoon, and beat the big bad. But of course, Barty merges together with Orphan, and this is where the real true last boss of the game starts. We beat on Orphan for a time, but they start doing some weird magic shit which incapacitates everyone but Fang. Orphan reveals that they use people to become levied because their powers are finite, whereas the potential of humans is infinite. Orphan begins to torture Vanille in front of Fang, asking her once more to become Ragnarok. Fang says that she will do it, she'll become Ragnarok, and she will kill Orphan. Everyone jumps in to try and stop Fang, but she does some cool Dragoon dives and shit, and everyone in the party, except for Vanille for some reason, turns into a Seath. Fang just kinda lets him beat on her for a bit before turning into Ragnarok, who does in all honesty look pretty fucking badass. We then start getting flashbacks of everything that's happened in the story up to this point, everyone remembering what they've been through, and Vanille monologues over it about how anger wasn't ever a driving factor, but that we had something to fight for. And after the flashbacks end, we see Fang turned back to human, Orphan heals her up just to torture her some more as to force her to try to become Ragnarok again. Vanille gives a nice emotional speech about how she would rather fight and lose than give up, and everyone comes to her rescue, having turned back from being a Seath somehow. Everyone makes up and becomes friends again, and they talk a bit about the future they saw whilst they were as a Seath, with everyone smiling and laughing and having a grand old time, and it's honestly a pretty emotionally charged scene that would have hit me in the feels a lot more if the gameplay hadn't ruined the rest of the experience for me. Orphan starts doing some screeching shit and everyone's brand turns white like fangs. Orphan then slinks down into the puddle, Vanille throws up some more of her gang signs, and everyone gears up for the real final confrontation. Lightning gives a nice speech about their focus being living to make the impossible possible, and we get thrown into the final fight. The final confrontation with Orphan is a battle in which the party leader has Doom, however, they are quite generous with the amount of time, so you really shouldn't have to worry about it. After you properly beat the shit out of Orphan for the final time, he screeches and screams and falls down again. We see Cocoon turn off, everything goes blank, and the world starts to fall. Everyone grabs each other's hands, except for Fang and Vanille. Fang and Vanille decide that they are going to use their powers to become Ragnarok again, but this time, not for the purpose of destroying Cocoon. They pop out of the bottom and turn everything into crystal, successfully preventing Cocoon from ever falling to Gran Pulse. We then get to see the party locked into crystal stasis, and it fades to white. We hear Vanille calling out for them to wake up, and everyone turns back to normal. Everyone talks for a moment about having completed their focus and noticed that their brandings are all gone. Sarah and Dodge then come forwards, having turned back from their crystal stasis as well. Everyone embraces and has a nice touching moment together. We pan up and get to see deep into Cocoon where Vanille and Fang are stuck holding hands together as Crystal. After which the credits begin to roll, and we have ended not only Chapter 13, but the game as well. So that's the entire story of Final Fantasy XIII from start to finish, a nearly 13-year-old game now based on its worldwide release. Did I get the answers I was looking for? Having played through Final Fantasy XIII, do I think the criticisms of it were fair? Yes, I think the criticisms of the first game of the Lightning Saga are very well deserved. I understand exactly what problems people have with this game. The combat is either a hit or miss for you, and even when it is a hit, it's actively working against you with poor design choices, such as the party leader dying equating to a full wipe, or the stupid animation it has to play every time you want to paradigm shift. The boring linear progression through 90% of the game is absolutely dreadful, and I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to say that linear story-driven games are bad, but for a game like this to work well, you need to have spice. You can't expect the player to walk down the same copy-pasted hallway fighting the same exact enemies over and over for 4 hours straight and not start to get annoyed. And yes, while the game does have an open portion to it, that's all the way in Chapter 11. By that point, you've played probably close to 20-25 hours of walking through some hallways interrupted by meaningless cutscenes every 5 steps. A lot of people compare this game's linearity to Final Fantasy X, and in a lot of ways, that's a very fair comparison. But there's one major difference that I feel keeps Final Fantasy X on its toes when it comes to not being as bad as Final Fantasy XIII, and that's the sheer number of different areas that you actually go to. I want you to take a look at this list of locations from Final Fantasy X. The games play out almost the exact same way. You have to progress through a bunch of non-optional areas of the game until you reach towards the end, in which there is a more open grassy plains area. But comparing the list of areas that you go to in Final Fantasy X to the list of areas you go to in Final Fantasy XIII, you can see a stark difference. The two games are similar in total amount of playtime the average person will have. So the fact that Final Fantasy XIII has so few areas is where the problems of its linearity come into play. Because there are so few areas with so much playtime, everything feels longer, more drawn out, and tedious compared to 10, which has a much wider selection of places for the player to visit. It could have been fine had you spent a lot less time in each area the game had to offer, or even if they didn't want to do that, they could have done something such as flipping between the characters more often to break up the tedium. For example, you spend the entire Chapter 5 only playing as Lightning and Hope, but we already know that Saz and Vanille are off doing something elsewhere. Why not just have it so that there's 12 chapters, and instead of 5 focusing just on Lightning and Hope, and 6 just on Saz and Vanille, have one chapter, that being 5, in which it jumps between the two pairings more often. It's not perfect, but simple solutions like that can make it so much better. The characters are also a minor problem. They're exceedingly annoying at the worst of times and just okay at the best of times. No one is an extraordinarily memorable or well-written or impactful character. Hell, the most interesting and memorable character in the entire cast is Cid Raines, and he has like 30 minutes of total screen time. Snow and Hope are both obnoxiously hard to listen to, Hope constantly whining about how Snow killed his mother and how angry he is about it, and Snow having his delusions of grandeur constantly. The rest of the main cast are pretty inoffensive. I just wish that Saz got more screen time than he actually did, because although he isn't my favorite character, that would be Vanille, he is by far the most charismatic and enjoyable character. There is a lot of good with this game, but there's also a lot of bad with it. If they had just let it stew in the oven for maybe a year longer and had a proper idea of where they wanted to take the game before throwing it together, I think it could have been amazing. Final Fantasy XIII is just alright. I don't think I'd ever recommend people to play this game over another JRPG, especially when there's like a whole slew of better JRPGs just from Square Enix alone. But I also wouldn't ever dissuade someone from playing it if they already had an itch to do so. This isn't the end, however. This quest and journey has just started. Like I said, I sought out to see the whole saga, not just the first game, which means that next up on the chopping block is a game I actually remember quite fondly and have played twice now, Final Fantasy XIII 2. That, however, is for next time. For now, I'm gonna go to sleep because I've been working on this video nearly 18 hours a day for the past, 3 or 4 days. Good night.